An invisible woman to society, holding a baby in her arms and a soul in ruins, rings the wrong doorbell and unknowingly ignites the spark of a war that could destroy an entire family. Rain fell heavily on Beacon Hill that winter night in Boston. The wide streets, normally filled with luxury cars coming and going, were deserted under the relentless downpour. Amidst the storm, a solitary figure walked with difficulty, using her body to shield something in her arms. Rachel Oliver, 26 years old, held her daughter Lily against her chest, trying to prevent the 5-month-old from getting any wetter. Rachel's orange sanitation worker uniform was soaked, weighing heavily, on her tired shoulders after her night shift. She had nowhere to go. Overdue rent, unexpected eviction, and a lack of options left her without alternatives that night. She looked at the imposing house in front of her, an elegant 2-story building with stone details and an impeccable garden. The Newman Mansion. Rachel hesitated for a moment, but Lily's weak cry gave her courage. She approached the gate, pressed the doorbell 3 times and waited, feeling the water run down her face mingled with silent tears. Several minutes passed before lights came on inside the residence. The main door opened, and a tall man with a tired appearance emerged, wrapped in a navy blue robe. Caleb Newman, 38 years old, widened his eyes at the sight of the drenched figure. He had grown accustomed to the silence of dawn since Marianne had departed almost 2 years ago, leaving him alone to raise little Michael. What he saw left him paralyzed, a young woman holding a child, both completely soaked. "Please," murmured Rachel with a trembling voice, "could you give me some food for my daughter? I can pay by cleaning your house or garden, anything." Rachel's voice broke Caleb's paralysis. There was something about her, the way she spoke, that transported him to almost forgotten memories. Without saying a word, he opened the automatic gate and gestured for her to enter. "You're soaked," he observed, leading her inside. "Come, I'll get towels." The mansion's interior was even more impressive. Marble floors, paintings on the walls, fine wooden furniture. Everything reflected not just wealth but also good taste. Rachel entered hesitantly, conscious that her wet clothes were leaving a trail of water on the immaculate floor. "I'm sorry about that," she said, pointing to the wet floor. "I'll clean it before I leave." Caleb returned with soft towels and a small blanket. "First dry yourself and warm your daughter. We'll talk afterward." Rachel gratefully accepted the towels, first drying Lily, who had stopped crying and was now observing the new environment with curious eyes. Then she dried her own hair and tried her best to clean her uniform, though it remained damp. "What's your name?" asked Caleb, returning from the kitchen with a freshly prepared bottle. Rachel Oliver. "And this is my daughter, Lily." "How did you know where I live?" The question came out more directly than Caleb intended. "I've worked as a sanitation worker in this neighborhood for 3 years, explained Rachel. "I know all the houses on my route. Yours? Well, it's impossible not to notice." Caleb nodded, handing the bottle to Rachel. He watched attentively as she carefully fed the baby. There was a gentleness in her gestures that reminded him of, "You can spend the night here," he said suddenly. "There's a guest room on the ground floor. We'll talk more tomorrow." "I don't want to impose, Mr. Newman. If you could just—" "Caleb," he corrected. "You can call me Caleb. And it's no imposition. Nobody should be on the streets on a night like this, especially with a child." Rachel felt relief course through her exhausted body. She followed Caleb to a simple but comfortable room with a double bed and a crib in the corner, probably used by visitors with children. "The crib was my son's, Michael," explained Caleb. "He's 4 years old now. We keep it here for when we have visitors." "Thank you," said Rachel, carefully placing Lily in the crib. "I don't know how to thank you." "Rest. We'll talk in the morning." When Caleb left, Rachel looked around, still incredulous. She sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the comfort of the mattress beneath her tired body. This wasn't how she imagined her night would end when she was evicted from the small room she rented in the outskirts. She silently thanked her unexpected luck and swore to herself that she would find a way to repay the kindness. The next morning, Rachel woke up early, as usual. Lily was still sleeping peacefully in the crib. She found clean clothes folded on, A chair, a simple dress and a baby outfit, probably selected by one of the house staff. She changed quickly and, leaving Lily sleeping, decided to explore. The kitchen was empty and impeccably clean. Without thinking twice, Rachel began preparing breakfast. It was the least she could do to thank the unexpected hospitality. She found eggs, bread, fruit, and fresh coffee, and set to work. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and toast filled the room. That's when she heard light footsteps coming down the stairs. A small boy with brown hair and curious eyes appeared at the kitchen door. Michael Newman looked at Rachel with a mixture of curiosity and shyness. "Good morning," said Rachel with a gentle smile. "You must be Michael. I'm Rachel." The boy didn't respond, just continued observing her intently, as if trying to solve a complex puzzle in his childish mind. "Do you like pancakes?" asked Rachel, trying to break the ice. "I'm making some." Michael gave a small smile and nodded, slowly approaching. He climbed onto one of the high chairs at the kitchen counter and continued watching Rachel work. "My dad said you and your baby are going to stay with us," he finally said, with a childish voice that still stumbled over some words. "Just for today," Rachel gently corrected. "Your father was very kind to let us spend the night." "You can stay longer," replied Michael, with the typical simplicity of children. "The house is big." Rachel smiled, serving a pancake on the plate in front of the boy. While cutting the pancake into small pieces for him, she noticed Caleb standing at the door, observing the scene with an expression that mixed surprise and something deeper, almost nostalgic. "Good morning," he said, entering the kitchen. "I see you've met Michael." "Yes," replied Rachel. "I hope you don't mind that I used the kitchen. I wanted to thank you somehow." "I don't mind," said Caleb, sitting next to his son. "Actually, I can't remember the last time I smelled fresh coffee in the morning. Usually it's just me and the espresso machine." A soft cry interrupted the conversation. Lily had awakened. Rachel made a move to go get her, but Caleb stopped her with a gesture. "Finish preparing breakfast. I can bring her." Before Rachel could respond, he had already left for the guest room. He returned moments later with Lily in his arms, cradling her with a skill that surprised Rachel. "You're good with babies," she commented, taking her daughter in her arms. "I had to learn," replied Caleb, a shadow passing over his eyes. "Since Marianne left, it's been just Michael and me against the world." The name made Rachel feel an inexplicable shiver. Marianne. For some reason, she felt as if she had heard that name before, somewhere important. "Who is Marianne?" she asked innocently. Caleb hesitated, his eyes fixed on Michael, who was eating his pancake, oblivious to the adults' conversation. "My wife," he finally answered. "She left us when Michael was only 2 years old." The way he said "left" carried a weight that Rachel preferred not to explore at that moment. She nodded in understanding and turned her attention to Lily, who was now playing with a lock of her mother's hair. It was at this moment that they heard the sound of firm footsteps coming down the stairs. A woman of approximately 60, with perfectly arranged grey hair and erect posture, entered the kitchen. Her gaze, initially directed at Caleb, froze when she saw Rachel. "Good morning, Eleanor," said Caleb, rising. "This is Rachel and her daughter Lily. They spent the night here due to the storm." Eleanor Matthews, Marianne's mother and Caleb's mother-in-law, remained motionless, her face a mask of shock that slowly transformed into something close to suspicion. Her eyes scanned Rachel from head to toe, lingering on her face with disturbing intensity. "It's a pleasure, Ma'am," said Rachel, suddenly feeling uncomfortable under that scrutinizing gaze. "What are you doing in my kitchen?" asked Eleanor, ignoring the greeting. "Mrs. Matthews," intervened Caleb with a firm voice, "Rachel is our guest." "Guest?" repeated Eleanor, her voice rising an octave. "Since when do we invite strangers to spend the night in our home?" The atmosphere in the kitchen changed instantly. Michael stopped eating, looking anxiously between his grandmother and father. Lily, sensing the tension, began to whimper in Rachel's arms. "I was just leaving," Rachel said quickly. Thank you very much for your hospitality, but I don't want to cause problems. You're not going anywhere, said Caleb, surprising everyone, including himself. At least not until we finish the breakfast you prepared. The look that Caleb and Eleanor exchanged was loaded with unspoken tension, years of complex family dynamics condensed into seconds of silence. Finally, Eleanor sat at the table, as far as possible from Rachel. So, she said with false casualness, how did you and my son-in-law meet, Rachel? The question hung in the air like a loaded cloud, about to break into a new storm. The silence that followed Eleanor's question was interrupted only by the clinking of silverware against fine china. Rachel adjusted Lily in her lap before answering, feeling the weight of the matriarch's gaze upon her. Actually, ma'am, I knocked on the door last night during the storm. I was evicted from the room I was renting and had nowhere to go with my daughter. Mr. Newman. She hesitated, correcting herself. Caleb was kind enough to shelter us. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her thin lips forming a rigid line. And you work as... I'm a sanitation worker, ma'am. I've been working in urban cleaning for almost 4 years. Interesting, murmured Eleanor, her voice carrying a tone that suggested exactly the opposite. And the child's father? Mother, interrupted Caleb, giving his mother-in-law a warning look. That's none of our business. Rachel lowered her gaze to Lily, who was now playing contentedly with the edge of the tablecloth. It's okay, Caleb. Lily's father. He's not in the picture. It's just the two of us. Michael, who had remained silent, observing the adults' interaction, chose this moment to intervene in his childish way. Can I hold the baby? He asked, looking hopefully at Rachel. The innocent question broke the tension. Rachel smiled, relieved by the change of subject. Of course you can, Michael, but we need to be very careful, okay? Lily is still very tiny. With Caleb's help, Rachel accommodated little Lily in Michael's arms, who was sitting on the living room sofa. The boy smiled, enchanted with the baby, who stared at him with curiosity. She likes me, declared Michael with conviction. Look, Dad, she's smiling. Caleb observed the scene with a mixture of conflicting emotions. Seeing his son smiling like that, so at ease with Rachel's baby, was like witnessing the awakening of something that had been dormant for a long time. Since Marianne's departure, Michael rarely showed genuine enthusiasm. Eleanor remained in the kitchen, pretending to busy herself with the organization that Rachel had already done. Her eyes, however, never stopped observing the interaction in the living room through the open door. There was something in Rachel's posture, in the way she smiled, that deeply bothered her. It wasn't just suspicion of a stranger. It was something more visceral, like looking at a distorted mirror of a past she struggled to preserve. After breakfast, when Caleb went upstairs to prepare for work, Rachel began to gather her few belongings, preparing to leave. "Where are you going?" asked Caleb, surprising her by returning to the living room, already dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. "I need to look for a place to stay," replied Rachel. "I've already abused your hospitality too much." Caleb hesitated, running his hand through his dark hair in a gesture that Rachel would soon learn was characteristic of his difficult decision moments. "I have a proposal," he said finally. "We've been without a housekeeper for a few weeks. If you want, you can stay in the staff room and work here. It would be temporary until you find something better." Rachel's eyes widened at the unexpected offer. "But I have no experience as a housekeeper. I'm a sanitation worker and—" "You prepared a perfect breakfast and left the kitchen more organized than it was before," interrupted Caleb with a small smile. "And Michael seems to like you and your daughter. That's already more than enough for me." Rachel felt a lump in her throat. The offer was like a lifeline thrown in turbulent waters. "I accept," she said with a choked voice, "and I promise you won't regret it." What neither of them noticed was Eleanor's figure standing in the hallway, her fists clenched and her face pale with contained indignation. In the weeks that followed, Rachel assumed her duties at the Newman mansion with an efficiency that surprised everyone, including herself. She quickly adapted to the house routine, learning where everything was kept, memorizing the schedules and preferences of each family member. The staff room, although simple, was more comfortable than any place she had ever lived. It had a single bed for her, a crib for Lily, a small wardrobe, and a private bathroom. Rachel kept everything impeccably clean, grateful for the opportunity she had been given. Caleb spent most of the day out, managing the technology company he had inherited from his father. When he was home, however, Rachel noticed how he gradually spent more time in the common room or kitchen, spaces that, according to the other staff, he used to avoid, preferring the isolation of his office. Michael flourished in the presence of Rachel and Lily. The boy, who previously spent hours in silence playing alone, now followed Rachel around the house, helping with small tasks and telling made-up stories to the baby, who responded with enchanted smiles and gurgles. "Aunt Rachel," called Michael one afternoon, while she was folding clothes in the laundry room, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, Michael. What do you want to know?" The boy hesitated, playing with the hem of his shirt. "Did you know my mom?" The question caught Rachel by surprise. "Your mom?" "No, dear. Why do you think that?" "Because you look like her," replied Michael with the disconcerting simplicity of children, "in the eyes and in the way you smile." Rachel felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't the first time. She had noticed strange looks from the older staff, or the way Caleb sometimes seemed lost in thought while observing her from afar. But hearing this from Michael's mouth made the situation more real, more disturbing. "I never knew your mother, Michael," she said softly, "but I'm sure she was a very special person." The boy nodded, thoughtful. "Grandma has many pictures of her in her room. Want to see?" Before Rachel could respond, they were interrupted by Eleanor's voice. "Michael, what are you doing here?" The matriarch appeared at the laundry room door, her gaze oscillating between her grandson and Rachel. "I've told you not to bother the staff while they work." "He's not bothering me, Mrs. Matthews," assured Rachel with a conciliatory smile. "Michael helps me with tasks." "It's no place for him," insisted Eleanor, extending her hand to her grandson. "Come, Michael, it's time for your snack." The boy looked at Rachel with a silent apology before following his grandmother. Rachel sighed, returning to the task of folding clothes, but the conversation with Michael echoed in her mind. The resemblance to Marianne. Was it coincidence, or was there something deeper that she couldn't understand? That night, after putting Lily to sleep, Rachel found Caleb on the back porch. He was sitting in a wicker chair, contemplating the garden illuminated by small lights embedded in the lawn. A glass of whiskey rested untouched on the table beside him. "May I join you?" asked Rachel hesitantly. Caleb seemed to come out of a trance, turning to her with a tired smile. "Of course, please." Rachel sat in the chair next to him, feeling the cool Boston night air. For a few minutes they sat in silence, just appreciating the quietness of the moment. "Michael asked me a strange question today," Rachel finally said. "He asked if I knew his mother." Caleb visibly stiffened. "And what did you answer?" "The truth, that I never knew her." Rachel hesitated before continuing. "He said we look alike, in the eyes and smile." Caleb picked up the whiskey glass and took a long sip before responding. "Marianne had expressive eyes like yours, and a smile that illuminated everything around." The way he spoke, with a mixture of pain and reverence, made Rachel feel strangely intrusive, as if she were invading a private sanctuary. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. "Loss," repeated Caleb, as if testing the word. "Yes, that's what it was. An irreparable loss." He looked directly at Rachel, his eyes reflecting the small garden lights. "But for the first time in almost 2 years, I see Michael truly happy. And that's a gift I didn't expect to receive." Rachel felt her face warm under Caleb's intense gaze. "He's a wonderful boy." "Marianne would have loved you," Caleb said suddenly. "She believed that people find people when they need each other most." Before Rachel could respond, the porch door opened and Eleanor appeared, her face a mask of disapproval. "Caleb, I need to talk to you," she said, completely ignoring Rachel's presence. "It's about the preparations for the 2-year anniversary of Marianne's departure." The moment of connection between Rachel and Caleb instantly evaporated. He nodded to his mother-in-law, rising. "Of course, Eleanor. I'm coming." Casting a last glance at Rachel, Caleb followed his mother-in-law into the house, leaving her alone with her confused thoughts and a growing sensation that there was more to this family than appeared at first sight. The next morning, while organizing a cabinet in the main hallway, Rachel found a box of old photographs. She didn't intend to snoop, but one image in particular caught her attention. It was a photo of a picnic in a park, showing a younger Caleb smiling next to a dark-haired woman with bright eyes. Marianne. Rachel felt her heart accelerate. The resemblance was undeniable and disturbing. Same facial structure, same expressive eyes, same smile. If it weren't for some subtle details and the age difference, they could be mistaken for sisters or even the same person at different times. "What are you doing?" Eleanor's cutting voice made Rachel startle, almost dropping the box. She quickly replaced the photograph. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was just organizing the cabinet as Caleb asked." Eleanor approached, taking the box from Rachel's hands with excessive firmness. "These are personal family memories. It's not part of your duties to handle them." "I apologize," murmured Rachel, feeling guilty despite not having done anything intentionally wrong. "It won't happen again." The look that Eleanor gave Rachel was loaded with something beyond simple irritation. There was a deep suspicion, a distrust that bordered on hatred. "Who are you really, Rachel Oliver?" asked Eleanor, her voice low and dangerous. "I don't understand the question, ma'am." "I'm not an idiot," continued Eleanor, approaching until she was just inches from Rachel, appearing out of nowhere, in the rain, with a touching story, gaining the trust of my son-in-law and grandson so quickly, and this resemblance. She left the sentence hanging, her eyes scanning Rachel's face as if looking for clues to a crime. "Ma'am, I just needed help that night," replied Rachel, maintaining her composure despite the discomfort. "And I'm grateful for the opportunity your family gave me. There's nothing more to it than that." Eleanor smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We'll see, Rachel, we'll see." That afternoon, when everyone believed Eleanor had left for her weekly commitment at the club, she actually remained in the mansion, locked in her room. Sitting at the antique desk, she furiously typed on her laptop, researching everything she could about Rachel Oliver. Born in Worcester, Massachusetts, raised by a single mother, Josephine, who had passed away when Rachel was 17, moved to Boston shortly after, beginning to work as a sanitation worker at 18. No criminal records, no active social networks, an apparently simple and transparent life. But for Eleanor, this was just the surface. There was something about Rachel, an inexplicable connection with Marianne, that the matriarch was determined to discover. Not out of curiosity, but out of a visceral need to protect what she considered her territory, her daughter's memory, and her grandson's future. Meanwhile, downstairs, Rachel was rocking Lily to sleep, softly humming a lullaby. Michael had joined them, sitting on the room's carpet, drawing in his notebook with intense concentration. "What are you drawing, Michael?" asked Rachel, peering over the boy's shoulder. "Our family," he replied simply. "Look." Rachel looked at the colorful drawing. In it, Michael had represented himself holding hands with his father, Eleanor next to them, and two female figures holding a baby, one with angel wings, the other wearing the orange uniform that Rachel wore when she arrived. "Who are they?" asked Rachel, feeling a lump in her throat. "This is my mum," explained Michael, pointing to the figure with wings. "And this is you with Lily. You both take care of me now." Rachel felt tears spring to her eyes. Michael's innocence, his capacity to accept and love without reservations, was a painful contrast to Eleanor's growing hostility. "It's a beautiful drawing, Michael," she said, kissing the top of the boy's head. "May I keep it for myself?" Michael smiled, carefully tearing the sheet from the notebook and handing it to Rachel. "It's yours." That night, after everyone was asleep, Rachel looked again at Michael's drawing, sitting on the edge of her bed in the staff room. Beside her, Lily slept peacefully in the improvised crib. Rachel couldn't deny that in just a few weeks she had developed a genuine affection for that family, especially for Michael, who seemed so in need of maternal affection. And as for Caleb, well, there was something about him, a silent kindness and a quiet strength that she increasingly admired. But Eleanor's hostility and the strange resemblance to Marianne cast a shadow over everything. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking through a minefield where each step could trigger an explosion. What she didn't know was that, at that exact moment, Eleanor had just hired a private investigator to uncover everything about her past, and that the matriarch wouldn't rest until she was sure that Rachel Oliver was exactly who she claimed to be, or expose her as the imposter she suspected she was. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into a month. Rachel had become an essential part of the Newman Mansion routine. Her skilled hands took care not only of the cleaning and organization, but also brought a touch of life to the environment that had long seemed immersed in silent mourning. Meals were now served at the table, with everyone gathered, something that, according to the housekeeper Martha, hadn't happened since Marianne's departure. Michael no longer spent hours isolated in his room. He preferred to be wherever Rachel was, helping her with small tasks or simply watching her care for Lily. Even Caleb seemed to be gradually reborn. His arrivals from work became earlier, his countenance lighter, and it wasn't uncommon to find him in the kitchen talking to Rachel while she prepared dinner, Lily babbling in the baby bouncer placed on the counter. The only one who remained impassive in her hostility was Eleanor. Her suspicious looks at Rachel became more intense each day, and her interventions to separate Michael from the housekeeper were increasingly frequent and less subtle. On a particularly sunny Saturday afternoon, Rachel decided to take Lily shopping at the neighborhood market. She needed some personal items and wanted to take advantage of her weekly day off. "Can I come along?" asked Michael, appearing at Rachel's room door as she was getting ready. Rachel hesitated. She knew Eleanor would disapprove, but Caleb had gone out to resolve matters at the office, and the boy seemed so eager for an outing. "You need to ask your grandmother's permission first," she responded diplomatically. Michael's face contorted into a grimace. "She'll say no. She always says no when it's something with you." The observation, made with typical childlike frankness, hit Rachel squarely. It was true. Eleanor did everything to limit contact between her grandson and the new housekeeper. "Michael, began Rachel, but she was interrupted by Eleanor's firm voice. "Michael already has commitments for this afternoon," she announced, appearing in the hallway as if materializing from Rachel's very fears. "We're going to visit his mother's memorial in the botanical garden." The boy lowered his head, visibly disappointed, but didn't argue. Rachel felt a pang of sadness, seeing how the childish joy faded under his grandmother's command. "Enjoy your walk," said Eleanor to Rachel, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We all need time outside these walls, don't we?" There was something in Eleanor's tone that made Rachel feel a chill. It wasn't just the usual hostility. There seemed to be an expectation, almost an anticipation, that made her uncomfortable. So Rachel proceeded with her plans. She put Lily in the stroller and walked to the small commercial center of Beacon Hill, where there was a market she frequented before working at the mansion. The day was beautiful, with the blue sky rarely seen in Boston, and Rachel tried to push away her concerns about Eleanor from her mind. At the market, while choosing fruits for a puree for Lily, Rachel felt watched. She looked around several times but saw nothing beyond other customers busy with their shopping. She attributed the sensation to the paranoia she had been developing in recent weeks under Eleanor's constant gaze. She finished her shopping, paid at the checkout, and placed the bags in the lower compartment of the stroller. As she walked back, she decided to pass through a small tree-lined square that was on the way. She sat on a bench, taking Lily out of the stroller so the little one could feel the mild afternoon sun. It was then that everything happened very quickly. Two men approached from behind the bench. One of them pushed the stroller with the shopping, while the other bumped into Rachel, almost making her drop Lily. "Watch where you're going," said one of them in a hoarse voice, before both moved away. Rapidly, Rachel, trembling, hugged Lily tightly. The baby, frightened, began to cry. The strangest thing was that nothing had been stolen, neither the purse that was in the stroller nor the shopping, nothing. It had been just a scare, a warning. "Are you all right, miss?" asked an elderly woman passing by. Those men looked dangerous. "We're fine," replied Rachel, still shaken. "Just a scare." She returned to the mansion earlier than planned, her heart still racing from the incident. Upon arriving, she found only Martha, the housekeeper, who helped her with the bags. "Did something happen, Rachel?" asked the older woman, noticing the paleness on the young woman's face. Rachel hesitated before telling about the strange encounter. In the square, Martha listened attentively, her wrinkled face furrowing in concern. "How strange," she commented. "They didn't steal anything." "Nothing. It was as if they just wanted to scare me." Martha cast a significant look at the stairs, in the direction of Eleanor's quarters, but said nothing. There was no need. Both knew that the matriarch had left with Michael at the exact time the incident occurred. When Caleb returned that night, Rachel decided not to mention what had happened. She already had enough problems with Eleanor. She didn't want to seem like she was trying to turn the employer against his mother-in-law. Besides, she had no proof of anything, just suspicions and coincidences. However, the next morning during breakfast, Michael made an innocent observation that changed everything. "Grandma talked with two strange men yesterday," he said, biting into a piece of toast. "When we were at the botanical garden." Caleb, who was reading the newspaper, looked up. "Strange men, how so?" "She told me to wait on the bench while she talked to them. They were tall and wore dark glasses, even though they were in the shade." Michael shrugged as if the subject wasn't important. "Afterward, she bought me ice cream and asked me not to tell anyone." Rachel felt her blood freeze. The description, though vague, matched the men from the square, and the request for secrecy. Why would Eleanor ask her grandson not to mention a casual encounter unless there was something to hide? Caleb noticed the change in Rachel's expression. "Are you okay, Rachel?" "Yes, sir," she replied automatically, avoiding his eyes. "Just remembering that I need to wash the curtains today." But Caleb wasn't convinced. After Michael finished breakfast and left to play, he approached Rachel, who was collecting the dishes. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" he asked directly. "You've been different since yesterday." Rachel felt the weight of his gaze upon her. It was a gentle, concerned gaze, so different from Eleanor's cold scrutiny. For a moment, she considered telling him everything, the incident. In the square, her suspicions about Eleanor, even the strange resemblance to Marianne that everyone seemed to notice. But something held her back. "I'm just tired," she lied, forcing a smile. "Lily didn't sleep well last night." Caleb nodded, though he didn't seem entirely convinced. "If you need anything or if something is bothering you here, you can tell me. You know that, right?" "I know, thank you, Caleb." When he walked away, Rachel let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The situation was becoming increasingly complicated. If Eleanor was really behind the square incident, how far would she go to remove Rachel from the mansion? And why? Just because of the resemblance to Marianne? Or was there something more, something that Rachel couldn't see? That afternoon, while organizing some books in the library, Rachel heard voices coming from Caleb's office. The door was ajar and she couldn't help but overhear part of the conversation. "I'm not asking your permission, Eleanor. I'm informing you of my decision," Caleb was saying with a firmness that Rachel rarely heard in his voice. "This is an insult to Marianne's memory," replied Eleanor, her voice trembling with indignation. "Bringing that woman to take her place." "Nobody is taking Marianne's place," retorted Caleb. "Rachel is an employee who has been doing an excellent job, and Michael likes her and her daughter. That should be enough." "Don't you see what's happening?" Eleanor's voice rose an octave. "The resemblance, the way she infiltrated this house, how she's manipulating you and Michael. She wants to take Marianne's place." "Enough," Caleb's voice sounded like thunder. "I won't tolerate these unfounded accusations anymore. Rachel stays, and that's my final word." Rachel quickly moved away from the door when she heard footsteps approaching. Seconds later, Eleanor emerged from the office, her face contorted in a mask of contained fury. Seeing Rachel in the hallway, her eyes narrowed dangerously. "Enjoy it while you can," she hissed as she passed Rachel. "This won't last." Into the days that followed, The tension in the mansion became almost palpable. Eleanor intensified her silent campaign against Rachel, creating small situations to discredit her in Caleb's eyes. A broken dish here, a missing object there, always with circumstances that pointed to the housekeeper's negligence. Rachel, in turn, redoubled her care and attention, determined not to give real reasons for complaints. But the emotional wear began to affect her. At night, after putting Lily to sleep, she often found herself crying silently, questioning whether it was worth remaining in such a hostile environment. What kept her there was Michael. The boy had developed a genuine bond with her and Lily, and Rachel couldn't bear the idea of abandoning him, of being one more person to leave his life without explanation. One afternoon, while tidying Michael's room, a task that Eleanor constantly tried to prevent her from performing, Rachel found a small photo album hidden under the boy's pillow. Curious, she opened it. It was a homemade album, clearly assembled by Michael, with photos he had taken himself with a children's camera. Most showed Rachel and Lily in everyday moments, Rachel cooking, Rachel folding clothes, Lily smiling in the crib. On the last page there was something that made Rachel's heart stop for an instant. An old photo of Marianne, taken from some frame in the house, glued next to a recent photo of Rachel. Underneath, in Michael's irregular handwriting, was written, "My two mums." Rachel closed the album with trembling hands, placing it exactly where she had found it. Michael's innocence was touching, but also dangerous. If Eleanor found that album, her reflections were interrupted by a noise coming from the hallway. Rachel left the room to investigate and found Lily sitting on the hallway floor, playing with colorful blocks under Martha's supervision. "Sorry, Rachel," said the housekeeper. "She was restless, so I brought her to play here while you finished your tasks." "It's okay, Martha. Thank you for taking care of her." Rachel picked up her daughter, grateful for the housekeeper's kindness, who had become a silent ally against Eleanor's machinations. She was about to return to Michael's room when she saw something that made her freeze. Eleanor, standing at the end of the hallway, observing her with a strange smile on her lips and her cell phone in hand, as if she had just made a call. That night, Caleb invited Rachel for a conversation in his office after dinner. His face was serious, almost somber, and Rachel felt growing anxiety as she sat in the chair indicated by him. "Rachel," began Caleb, choosing his words carefully, "something happened today that left me concerned." "What happened?" she asked, her heart accelerating. "I received a call from a man named Marcus Wells. He introduced himself as a private investigator." Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. "Investigator?" "Yes, he said he was hired to investigate your past." Caleb paused, studying her reaction. By Eleanor, Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions. She wasn't really surprised. She had suspected Eleanor would do something like this, but hearing the confirmation was still a blow. "And what did he discover?" she finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Actually," said Caleb, leaning forward, "he called me because he's uncomfortable with the nature of the investigation. He said Eleanor isn't just interested in your past, but is actively trying to find or create information that could harm you." Rachel released the breath she was holding. "I have nothing to hide, Caleb. My life was simple, ordinary, perhaps even monotonous before I came here." "I know," he replied softly. "Marcus confirmed that. He said your story checks out in every detail. The work as a sanitation worker, the loss of your mother in adolescence, everything." "Then why tell me this?" Caleb stood up, walking to the window before turning to face her again. "Because I'm concerned about your safety, and Lily's. Marcus mentioned that Eleanor seemed obsessed, and that it could be dangerous." The words hung in the air, heavy and threatening. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine as she remembered the men in the square. "There was an incident," she finally admitted. "Last Saturday when I went to the market with Lily. 2 men approached us in the square. They didn't steal anything, just scared us." Caleb's face hardened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I had no proof of anything, and I didn't want to create more problems between you and Eleanor." "Rachel," said Caleb, his voice soft but firm, Your safety and Lily's are more important than any family harmony. From now on, I want you to tell me everything, any strange thing that happens." He paused, running his hand through his hair in a gesture that Rachel now knew well. "And I'm going to talk to Marcus Wells personally. If my mother-in-law is hiring people to intimidate you, this needs to stop immediately." Rachel felt a wave of gratitude and something more, something she didn't allow herself to name, seeing the determination in Caleb's eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. Caleb approached, sitting on the edge of the desk in front of her. "Rachel, there's something I need to ask you, and I want you to be completely honest with me." She nodded, apprehensive. "This resemblance to Marianne, did you know about it before coming here?" The question caught Rachel by surprise. "No, of course not. I didn't even know who Marianne was until I got here, and I only saw photos of her weeks later." Caleb studied her face for a long moment, as if looking for signs of lying. Finally, he nodded. "I believe you, and I promise I'll protect you and Lily no matter what." In that moment, something changed between them. It wasn't just the words, but the way Caleb looked at her, not as an employee or someone to whom he had extended a hand out of charity, but as a person he deeply cared about. Rachel felt her heart accelerate under that gaze. She wanted to say something, anything to express the whirlwind of emotions she felt, but the words wouldn't come. The moment was interrupted by gentle knocks on the door. It was Martha, looking agitated. "Sorry to interrupt, sir," said the housekeeper, "but Mrs. Matthews is having one of her episodes in Michael's room." Caleb rose immediately. "What happened?" "She found something that disturbed her. A photo album, I believe. She's very upset and the boy is frightened." Rachel felt a knot in her stomach. Michael's album with the photos of her and Marianne. Eleanor had found it. "Let's go," said Caleb, quickly heading for the door. Rachel followed him, her heart beating so hard it seemed about to leap from her chest. In the hallway leading to Michael's room, they could hear Eleanor's shouts, interspersed with the boy's frightened crying. Rachel had never seen the matriarch lose control like that, and the scene they found upon entering the room was disturbing. Eleanor was holding the small album open to the last page, where the photos of Marianne and Rachel were side by side. Her face was contorted in an expression that went beyond anger. It was almost dementia. "Look at this," she shouted, pushing the album in Caleb's direction. "Look what she's doing, erasing Marianne from his memory, replacing her." Michael was huddled in a corner of the bed, silent tears streaming down his face. Seeing Rachel at the door, he extended his arms in a silent plea for protection. Rachel ran to the boy, hugging him protectively, which only increased Eleanor's fury. "Get away from him," shouted the matriarch. "You don't have that right. You're not his mother. You'll never be Marianne." "Eleanor, enough," Caleb's voice thundered through the room. "You're frightening Michael." "I'm frightening me," Eleanor pointed an accusing finger at Rachel. "This imposter is manipulating all of you. Don't you see what she's doing? First she resembles Marianne, then she takes her place in the kitchen with Michael, and now she's trying to take her place in your bed too." The silence that followed. The accusation was deafening. Rachel felt her face burn with shame and indignation, while Caleb seemed to have been physically hit by his mother-in-law's words. "Martha," he finally said, his voice controlled but trembling with contained anger, "please take Michael to Rachel's room. He can stay with her and Lily tonight." The housekeeper promptly approached, taking Michael by the hand. The boy looked one last time at his father and grandmother before leaving with Martha and Rachel. In the hallway, Rachel could still hear fragments of the heated discussion that followed. Caleb's voice, usually so calm, rose in tones she had never heard before. Words like obsession, unacceptable, and limit echoed through the old walls of the mansion. While helping Michael settle into an improvised bed next to Lily's crib, Rachel felt that a breaking point had been reached. Something had broken that night, not just the facade of civility that maintained peace in the mansion, but also the delicate web of deceptions and half-truths that everyone had been weaving around Marianne's memory. And in the midst of this turmoil, Rachel was beginning to realize that her feelings for Caleb had grown beyond gratitude or friendship. What she felt was deeper, more complex, and potentially more dangerous, considering the circumstances. When Michael finally fell asleep, exhausted by the emotional stress, Rachel stayed awake observing the two little ones, Lily in her crib and Michael in the improvised bed. In the dim light of the room, she finally allowed herself the question she had been avoiding for weeks. What was really her place in that house, and how far would Eleanor go to ensure she didn't occupy it? The answer would come sooner than she imagined, and in a way that would forever change the course of their lives. The next morning dawned with a palpable tension hanging over the Newman mansion. Breakfast, normally a time of light conversation and Michael's laughter, transpired in an uncomfortable silence. Eleanor didn't come down to join the family, remaining locked in her room since the previous night's discussion. Rachel moved around, the kitchen with silent efficiency, preparing Michael's favorite pancakes, in the hope of cheering up the boy, who was pushing the food around on his plate without enthusiasm. Caleb, meanwhile, kept his eyes fixed on the newspaper he was clearly not reading, the tension evident in the way his fingers gripped the pages. "Michael," he finally said, folding the newspaper and setting it aside, "why don't you go play in the garden with Martha? It's a beautiful day outside." The boy looked at his father, then at Rachel, as if seeking permission from her as well. Rachel nodded with an encouraging smile, and Michael left the table without protest, following Martha outside. When they were alone, Caleb sighed deeply, running his hands over his face in a gesture of weariness. "I spent half the night talking with Eleanor," he said, "trying to make her understand that her behavior is out of control, that she's frightening Michael and creating a toxic environment for all of us." Rachel remained silent, waiting for him to continue. She refuses to admit there's anything wrong with her actions. She insists she's just protecting Marianne's memory and Michael's future. Caleb looked directly at Rachel, and she demands that you and Lily leave this house by the end of the week. The words hit Rachel like a physical blow, though they weren't, completely unexpected. "I understand," she said softly. "I can start looking for another place today." "No," interrupted Caleb firmly. "You're not going anywhere, Rachel. This is my house, and I decide who stays or leaves." Rachel felt a wave of relief mixed with concern. "But Mrs. Matthews, Eleanor has two options: accept my decision or find another place to live. I was clear with her about this." Caleb stood up, approaching Rachel. "You brought life back to this house, Rachel, to Michael and to me. I won't let Eleanor destroy that because of her insecurities and obsessions." Caleb's proximity, the intensity of his words, made Rachel's heart race. "I'm afraid of what she might do," she admitted in a low voice. "After that incident in the square, and now this." "That's why I hired Marcus Wells," revealed Caleb. "Not just to investigate the men who approached you, but also to keep an eye on the situation. He's discreet and competent. If Eleanor tries anything, we'll know." Rachel nodded, trying to absorb everything. "And what about Michael?" "He's confused, frightened. I'll talk to him today, explain in the best way possible considering his age." Caleb hesitated before continuing. "Rachel, there's something else I need to say." His voice changed, becoming softer, almost vulnerable. Rachel felt her heart skip a beat. "I know it's complicated. The situation, this house, Eleanor, Marianne's, her memory to everything, but what I feel for you is—" The sound of the telephone interrupted the moment. Caleb closed his eyes for an instant, visibly frustrated by the interruption, before answering. "Hello? Yes, it's him." "What? When?" "I see. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up with a grave expression. "Problems at the company. 1. Of the main servers failed, and there's crucial information at risk. I need to go immediately." "Of course," said Rachel, trying to hide her disappointment. "Everything will be fine here." Caleb grabbed his briefcase, but before leaving, he paused in front of Rachel. For a moment, it seemed he was going to say something more, complete the interrupted thought. Instead, he surprised her with an unexpected gesture. He gently touched her face, a touch as brief as it was significant, before heading to the door. "I'll be back as soon as possible," he promised. "Call me if there's any problem." After Caleb's departure, Rachel tried to resume her normal routine. She washed the breakfast dishes, organized the kitchen, and went to get Lily, who was with Martha in the garden, along with Michael. The morning passed without incident, with Eleanor remaining in her quarters, emerging only for a quick meal that she took back to her room. It was in the early afternoon that Rachel noticed something strange. Upon entering the room to change Lily, she found the dresser drawers slightly open, as if someone had hastily rummaged through them. Nothing seemed to be missing, but the sensation of invasion was disturbing. Later, when preparing Michael's snack, she noticed that some utensils weren't in their usual places. Small alterations in the order she had established in the kitchen, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but glaring to someone as methodical as Rachel. "Martha," she asked when the housekeeper entered the kitchen, "did you move the kitchen drawers today?" The older woman looked confused. "No, dear. Why?" "Nothing," replied Rachel, not wanting to seem paranoid. "Just noticed some things out of place." Martha approached, lowering her voice. "Mrs. Matthews went out earlier. Said she was going to the market, but came back very quickly. Perhaps she—" The housekeeper didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. The implication was clear. Eleanor could be going through Rachel's things, perhaps looking for something to incriminate her, or simply to destabilize her. The sensation of being watched, of having her spaces invaded, grew throughout the day. Rachel began to constantly check the room, concerned about Lily, even when the baby was under Martha's care. Around 4 in the afternoon, she received a message from Caleb saying that the problem at the company was more serious than he had imagined, and that he would be back late. Feeling increasingly anxious, Rachel decided to get ahead on some tasks in the service area while Lily took her afternoon nap. She placed the baby in the portable crib she kept in the laundry room for these occasions, making sure she was secure and asleep, and began folding the freshly dried clothes. The work was comforting in its simplicity and familiarity, helping her calm her nerves. When the kitchen phone rang, Rachel hesitated. Normally Martha answered the calls, but the housekeeper had gone out to take Michael to the doctor for his annual checkup at Caleb's request. After the 3rd ring, Rachel decided to answer, leaving Lily sleeping peacefully in the crib. "Newman Residence," she said formally. "Rachel!" Caleb's voice sounded from the other end, tense and hurried. "I need you to check something for me in the office. There's a blue folder in the 2nd drawer of the desk with documents I need urgently. Could you find it and tell me which documents are in there?" "Of course," replied Rachel, surprised by the unusual request. "I'll check right away." She left the phone off the hook and quickly went upstairs to Caleb's office on the 2nd floor. She entered the elegant room, heading for the solid wood desk. The 2nd drawer was locked. Strange, she thought. Caleb didn't mention anything about a key. She tried the other drawers, but they were all equally locked. She returned to the phone, descending the stairs hurriedly. "Caleb, the drawers are locked. I need the key to—" She stopped abruptly upon realizing that the line had been disconnected. A chill ran down her spine. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She ran back to the service area, her heart pounding in her chest with a terrible premonition. Upon entering the room, her world collapsed. Lily's crib was empty. "Lily!" she called, her voice trembling. "Lily!" She searched frantically throughout the service area, then through the kitchen, living room, hallways, shouting her daughter's name with increasing desperation. No one answered. The house seemed strangely silent, almost as if it were holding its breath. She ran upstairs, heading to Eleanor's quarters. She knocked on the door forcefully, calling for the matriarch. No response. She turned the doorknob and found the room empty, the bed perfectly made, as if no one had been there all. "Padres!" Panic took hold of Rachel. She returned to the ground floor, checking every corner of the mansion, every closet, every space where a baby could be. Nothing. Lily had disappeared. With trembling hands, she picked up the phone and dialed Caleb's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again with the same result. Finally, in desperation, she called the police. "Emergency? What's your situation?" replied a calm voice on the other end. "My daughter," said Rachel, her voice breaking. "My baby is missing. She was sleeping in the crib, and now she's gone." She gave the address of the Newman mansion and a brief description of Lily and the circumstances of the disappearance. The attendant assured her that a patrol car would be sent immediately. While waiting, Rachel continued searching, opening doors, looking under furniture, calling for Lily as if the baby could answer. Tears flowed freely down her face, and her entire body trembled. That's when she heard the sound of keys in the front door. For a moment, a crazy hope invaded her. Perhaps Martha had returned with Michael and, for some inexplicable reason, taken Lily with them. She ran to the entrance hall, but it was Caleb who was entering, looking confused at seeing Rachel running in his direction, her face marked by tears and terror. "Rachel, what happened?" "Lily," she managed to say between sobs. "She's gone. Someone took her. I answered the phone. It was you asking for something from the office, but when I came back, she wasn't in the crib anymore." The confusion on Caleb's face gave way to shock, then concern. "What are you talking about? I didn't call here." "But I talked to you. It was your voice," insisted Rachel, desperately gripping Caleb's arms. "Rachel, I've been in consecutive meetings all afternoon. My cell phone was turned off." He held her shoulders firmly. "Are you sure it was my voice?" Doubt began to infiltrate Rachel's mind. If it wasn't Caleb on the phone, who could it be? And why would someone do this? Unless it was to... "Oh my God," she murmured, understanding hitting her like lightning. It was a trap, to get me away from Lily. At that moment, they heard the sound of sirens approaching. The police had arrived. Rachel felt momentarily relieved. Professionals were on the way, people who would know what to do, how to find her daughter. The scene that followed seemed straight out of a nightmare. Uniformed police officers entering the mansion, asking questions, inspecting the site of the disappearance. One of them, who introduced himself as Detective Carter, a middle-aged man with penetrating eyes, conducted the initial interrogation. "Mrs. Oliver, please tell us exactly what happened," he requested, notepad in hand. Rachel reported everything: the strange call, the search for the folder in the office, the return to find the empty crib. She also mentioned her suspicions about Eleanor and the previous incidents. "And where is Mrs. Matthews now?" asked the detective. "I don't know," replied Rachel. "I haven't seen her since lunch." Carter made a gesture to one of the officers, who immediately left to verify the matriarch's whereabouts. Meanwhile, another officer approached with information about the security cameras. "Mr. Newman, we checked the mansion's security system," he said. "All cameras were deactivated approximately 10 minutes before the estimated time of the disappearance." "Deactivated?" repeated Caleb, incredulous. "How is that possible? The system is password protected." "Someone with access to the password turned off the system manually," explained the officer. "From the main panel in your office." All eyes turned to Rachel. The implication was clear. She had been in Caleb's office moments before the disappearance. "No," she protested, feeling the blood drain from her face. "I went up because I thought Caleb had called me asking for a folder. I didn't touch anything other than the drawers, and they were locked." Detective Carter noted something in his notepad, his face impassive. "Mrs. Oliver, we need to consider all possibilities. You were the last person to see the child, and you were at the location where the security system was deactivated. Are you suggesting that I had something to do with my own daughter's disappearance?" Rachel's voice rose in indignation and despair. "I'm just following the facts, ma'am," replied Carter calmly. "For now, we need everyone to remain in the house while we continue the investigation." At that moment, the officer who had left to look for Eleanor returned. "No sign of her on the property, Detective, and according to the driver, she left in her own car about 2 hours ago." Rachel felt a wave of nausea. 2 hours, approximately the time that Lily had disappeared. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Detective," intervened Caleb, "I think we should seriously consider the possibility that my mother-in-law is involved in this. She has demonstrated obsessive behavior regarding Rachel and Lily, and her absence at this moment is, at the very least, suspicious." Carter looked from Caleb to Rachel, assessing the situation. "We'll issue an alert for Mrs. Matthews's car and check possible locations where she might be. Meanwhile, we need to organize a broader search for the child. The following hours passed in a blur of police activity, repeated questions, searches of the property and surroundings. Martha returned with Michael, who was kept away from the confusion under the housekeeper's care in his room. As night fell over Boston, Rachel's hope diminished. Sitting in the living room, she watched the police coming and going, their walkie-talkies crackling with incomprehensible communications. Caleb remained by her side, offering silent support, but she could feel the doubt growing, not just in the police but also in him. "You think I had something to do with this, don't you?" she finally asked, her voice almost inaudible. Caleb hesitated for a moment too long before responding. "No, I don't think so, but you have to admit that the circumstances are strange." Strange. Rachel felt a spark of anger amid the despair. "My daughter is missing, Caleb. My baby. And instead of helping me find her, they're treating me like a suspect." "We're doing everything we can, Rachel," said Caleb, trying to calm her. "The police are looking for Lily all over the city. If Eleanor took her, they'll find her." "If?" Rachel stood up abruptly. "You still have doubts? After everything she did, after all the threats, the incidents, you still can't see what's right in front of you?" Before Caleb could respond, Detective Carter approached them, his face serious. "Mrs. Oliver, we've received information about your financial situation. It appears you had significant debts before coming to work for the Newman family." Debts that, curiously, were recently paid off. Rachel felt as if the floor were disappearing beneath her feet. "What debts? What are you talking about?" "Loans from loan sharks in the neighborhood where you lived. About $10,000. Paid in full 3 days ago." "That's absurd. I never took a loan from any loan shark. I could barely pay my rent." Carter extended a folder to her. "We have documents that prove otherwise, ma'am, and testimonies from people in your old neighborhood." Rachel opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were papers that looked like loan contracts with her signature, a signature that, although similar to hers, had subtle differences that only she could notice. There were also photos of her talking to unknown men on street corners, photos clearly taken from a distance, without her knowledge. "This is a setup," she said, looking at Caleb pleadingly. "Someone is trying to frame me." Caleb's gaze was distant, now divided between doubt and concern. "If you have nothing to hide, Rachel, why not cooperate fully with the investigation? For Lily's sake." His words were like a stab. Rachel realized with growing horror that she was losing not just her daughter, but also the trust of the man she had begun to love. "That's exactly what I'm doing," she responded with dignity, despite the tears that threatened to fall. "But I won't confess to crimes I didn't commit." The detective observed the interaction with astute eyes. "Mrs. Oliver, perhaps it would be better if we talked at the precinct, in a more formal environment." "Am I being arrested?" asked Rachel, her voice trembling. "No. For now, we're just requesting your voluntary cooperation." Rachel looked at Caleb, seeking support, seeking the trust he had demonstrated earlier that same day. But what she found was hesitation, doubt, and something that seemed almost like resignation. In that moment, Rachel made a decision. She wouldn't wait to be framed for a crime she didn't commit. She wouldn't sit by while her daughter was somewhere, possibly in the hands of a woman disturbed by obsessions and resentments. "I'll get my purse," she told the detective, rising with a calmness she didn't feel. Carter nodded, making a gesture for one of his men to accompany her. Rachel went upstairs to her room, the officer a few steps behind. Inside the room, she grabbed her purse and discreetly stuffed it with some of Lily's clothes, along with the small amount of money she had saved. She adjusted the purse strap on her shoulder and returned to the hallway. But instead of going down the stairs back to the living room, she suddenly turned to the officer. "My baby is in danger," she said urgently. "Please help me find her, instead of wasting time interrogating me." The young officer looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I'm just following orders. Do you know what it's like to be a mother, to know that your child might be suffering and not be able to do anything?" Something in the officer's face changed. Perhaps empathy, perhaps just discomfort. He looked away for an instant, and it was all Rachel needed. In a quick move, she pushed open the door of the guest room next door, entered, and locked it before the officer could react. The window of the room gave onto a lower part of the roof. Without thinking twice, Rachel opened it and went out, ignoring the officer's shouts from the other side of the door. The sloped roof was dangerous, especially at night, but desperation gave her a courage she normally wouldn't have. She managed to reach a drainage pipe and carefully descended it to the garden. She heard agitated voices coming from inside the house. The officer had raised the alarm. She didn't have much time. She ran through the garden to the side wall where there was a tree whose branches extended beyond the property. With difficulty, she climbed the tree and crossed the wall, falling with a dull thud onto the sidewalk on the other side. Without looking back, Rachel ran into the Boston night, her heart divided between the terror of being alone, pursued, and the fierce determination to find her daughter, whatever the cost. As she moved away from the Newman mansion, she heard sirens in the distance, but didn't know if they were for her or part of some other emergency in the city. It didn't matter. All that mattered now was finding Lily, and for that, Rachel knew exactly where she needed to go, to find Marcus Wells, the private investigator that Caleb had hired. If there was anyone who could help her uncover the truth and find her daughter, it was him. The problem was that Rachel had no idea how to find him. She didn't have his number or address. She was alone in a hostile city, looking for a needle in a haystack, while the police probably already considered her a fugitive. But she wouldn't give up. Not while Lily was missing. Not while there was a breath of life in her body. With renewed determination, Rachel plunged into the shadows of the Boston night, beginning a journey that would change her life forever. The night in Boston was cold, typical of autumn in Massachusetts. Rachel walked hurriedly through the downtown streets, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the more illuminated areas. Her mind worked frantically, trying to elaborate a coherent plan amid the chaos of emotions that dominated her. Finding Marcus Wells was her priority, but how? She had no phone number, no address, nothing but the name. For a moment she considered, returning to the Newman mansion and confronting Caleb, demanding the investigator's contact. But she knew she would be arrested the instant she set foot on the property. After walking for almost an hour, Rachel found a cafe still open on Newbury Street. The place was almost empty at that hour. She entered, ordered a coffee, and sat in a discreet corner, trying to organize her thoughts. She needed a place to spend the night and some way to locate Marcus. That's when she remembered Patricia, a former colleague from her days as a sanitation worker. Patricia now worked as a receptionist at a public hospital, Boston General, in the Cambridge area. If there was anyone who could help her without asking too many questions, it was her. Gathering her last strength, Rachel headed to the nearest bus stop. She had enough money for the fare, and with luck Patricia would be on the night shift. The hospital was busy when Rachel arrived, shortly after 11 p.m. Patients were waiting for care, nurses and doctors circulated hurriedly. Rachel felt momentarily safe in the anonymity of that chaotic environment. She approached the reception, praying to find the familiar face of her friend. To her relief, there was Patricia typing something on the computer. When she looked up and saw Rachel, her expression changed from tiredness to surprise. "Rachel! My God, how long? What happened to you? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Patricia," Rachel whispered, leaning over the counter, "I need your help. It's an emergency." Something in the intensity of Rachel's gaze made Patricia understand the gravity of the situation. She looked around, making sure no one was paying attention to them. "My shift ends in 15 minutes. Wait for me at the diner on the corner." Rachel nodded, grateful for her friend's discretion, and left the hospital. At the indicated diner, she ordered another coffee, more to justify her presence than out of necessity. Her nerves were already on edge without additional caffeine. Punctually, 15 minutes later, Patricia entered the diner, now without her hospital uniform, wearing jeans and a simple jacket. She sat across from Rachel, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Now tell me what's going on," she said softly. "I haven't heard from you in months, and suddenly you appear in the middle of the night. looking like you're running from something." Rachel hesitated for just a second before breaking down. The words came in a torrent. Her arrival at the Newman mansion, the months working there, Eleanor, the strange resemblance to Marianne, the suspicious incidents, and finally, Lily's disappearance. "They're accusing me of having done something to my own daughter. Patricia," she concluded, tears flowing freely. "But it was Eleanor, I'm sure. And now I'm running from the police with no idea where to find Lily." Patricia listened to everything attentively, her face changing expression several times during the account. When Rachel finished, she extended her hand across the table holding her friend's. "I believe you," she said firmly, "and I'll help you find your daughter." Those simple words were like a balm to Rachel. After hours feeling alone against the world, finally someone believed her. "You can stay at my apartment tonight," continued Patricia. "It's not much, but it's safe, and tomorrow we'll start looking for this Marcus Wells." "How?" asked Rachel, feeling a spark of hope. "We have nothing but his name." A small smile appeared on Patricia's face. "I've worked in a hospital for 5 years, Rachel. I know doctors, nurses, administrative staff, and some police officers who do shifts there. If this Marcus is a private investigator in Boston, someone will know how to find him." Patricia's apartment was small but welcoming. A single bedroom, combined living room and kitchen, and a tiny bathroom. Rachel took a quick shower while her friend improvised a bed on the sofa. "Tomorrow morning I'll make some calls," said Patricia, handing Rachel a borrowed set of pajamas. "I have the day off so I can help you all day." Despite extreme exhaustion, Rachel could hardly sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lily's little face, imagined where she might be, if she would be frightened, if she would miss her mother. Tears wet the borrowed pillow, and she struggled to contain her sobs so as not to wake Patricia. In the morning, after a quick coffee, Patricia began her sequence of phone calls. Rachel watched anxiously as her friend talked, explained, asked for information, always careful not to reveal compromising details. It was on the 5th call that Patricia finally smiled, making a thumbs-up gesture to Rachel. "Thanks, Peter. So you won." She hung up and turned to Rachel, triumphant. "Marcus Wells, private investigator, office on Marlborough Street, number 1578, suite 304. It's not far from here." Rachel felt her heart leap. "Patricia, you're amazing." "I'm not done yet," continued her friend, typing something on her cell phone. "Peter is a police officer friend of mine. He said there's an alert for your location, but not a formal arrest warrant. They still consider you a person of interest, not a fugitive." "That's good, right?" "Relatively. But he also mentioned that they're following some leads about Eleanor. Apparently she didn't return home last night." The confirmation that the police also suspected Eleanor renewed Rachel's hopes. Perhaps there was still time to prevent her from being completely framed. "We need to go to this office now," she said, rising. Patricia shook her head. "We don't need to. I will. You stay here." "But, Rachel, your face might be circulating among police officers. I can approach this. Marcus, without raising suspicions, sound him out to see if he can really help before exposing you." The argument made sense no matter how much Rachel hated the idea of staying behind. She reluctantly nodded. "All right, but promise you'll come back soon." "I promise. And keep your cell phone off, as a precaution, if they need to track someone, let it be mine." After Patricia's departure, the minutes dragged like hours. Rachel paced back and forth in the small apartment, occasionally checking the window, startling at each distant siren. Finally, almost 2 hours later, she heard the key in the lock. Patricia entered, but she wasn't alone. Behind her came a tall man with graying hair and shrewd eyes behind thin framed glasses. He wore a simple but well-cut suit and carried a worn leather briefcase. "Rachel, this is Marcus Wells," Patricia introduced. "He wants to talk to you." Rachel felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. "You work for Caleb Newman," she said, more as an accusation than a question. "Worked," corrected Marcus, his voice deep and calm. "Our professional relationship ended yesterday when he decided to accept the police version of your involvement in Lily's disappearance." The mention of her daughter made Rachel anxiously approach. Do you know where she is? Have you found Lily? Not yet, replied Marcus, placing his briefcase on the table. But I have strong reasons to believe that Eleanor took her, and I think I know where to start looking. Rachel collapsed into a chair, hope and fear competing for space in her chest. Why are you helping me, if you don't work for Caleb anymore? A slight smile appeared on Marcus's austere face. Let's say I don't like it when powerful people manipulate the system to frame innocent people. Besides, he added, opening his briefcase, I found some interesting things about Eleanor that Mr. Newman refused to see. He spread some documents on the table, bank statements, phone records, photographs. Rachel and Patricia approached to examine them. In the last 2 months, Eleanor made significant withdrawals from her personal accounts, explained Marcus, pointing to the statements. Always in cash, always amounts below the limit that would require justification to the bank. For what? Asked Patricia. To pay these two, he answered, showing a photo where 2 men were talking with Eleanor in a parking lot. Rachel recognized them immediately. They're the men who approached me in the square. Alfred Miller and George Parker, confirmed Marcus. Small-time criminals known for special services, intimidation, threats, occasionally minor assaults. Never anything serious enough to attract much police attention. Rachel felt a shiver, thinking that these men might now be with her daughter. And what about Lily? Where did they take her? Marcus pulled out another document, a rental contract. Eleanor rented an apartment in Brookline 3 weeks ago, furnished, 6-month contract, advance payment in cash. The most interesting thing, he continued, is that she did it under her maiden name, Eleanor Davies, not Matthews. Clearly she didn't want the property to be easily traced back to her. Do you think Lily is there? Rachel's voice trembled with the possibility. It's our best bet at the moment, but we need to be careful. If Eleanor realizes we're getting close, she might flee with the child. And what about the police? Asked Patricia. Can't we just tell them? Marcus shook his head. Unfortunately, the Newman family's influence is considerable in Boston. Detective Carter is a long-time personal friend of Eleanor's. Without concrete evidence, he'll ignore our suspicions. So what do we do? Questioned Rachel, the frustration evident in her voice. First, we need to confirm if Lily is indeed in that apartment, replied Marcus. Then gather enough evidence to force the police to act, regardless of Eleanor's connections. Rachel stood up, determined. Let's go right now. Not so fast, intervened Marcus. We need a plan. We can't just invade the place. In the hours that followed, the 3 elaborated a strategy. Marcus would do the initial surveillance of the apartment, confirming Eleanor's presence and hopefully Lily's. Rachel and Patricia would stand by at a nearby cafe, ready to act as necessary. As they prepared to leave, Rachel found a crumpled note in the pocket of the pants Patricia had lent her. It was an old medical prescription. This gave her an idea. Patricia, could you get a nurse's uniform from the hospital? Her friend immediately understood. Thinking of disguising yourself? I can try, but why? If we confirm Lily is there, I can pose as a nurse making a home visit. Eleanor wouldn't recognize me immediately, and I could gain access to the apartment. Marcus considered the idea. It's risky, but it might work as a last resort. First, let's confirm Lily's location. Brookline was predominantly residential, with middle-class buildings and small local businesses. The building where Eleanor had rented the apartment was discreet, with a well-maintained facade and an electronic doorman. As planned, Rachel and Patricia settled in a cafe with a view of the building's entrance, while Marcus took position in his car parked a few meters away. The wait was agonizing. Rachel barely touched the coffee in front of her, her eyes fixed on the building's entrance, imagining if her daughter was in there, so close and yet unreachable. After almost 2 hours of surveillance, Patricia's cell phone vibrated with a message from Marcus. Eleanor just entered the building. She was carrying grocery bags and what looked like diapers. Rachel felt her heart race. Diapers. It was a strong indication that Lily was really there. She wanted to get up immediately and run to the building, but Patricia held her arm. Calm. Down, let's follow the plan. 15 more minutes passed before another message arrived. Confirmed. Apartment 502. I saw Eleanor through the window with a baby in her arms. Tears instantly came to Rachel's eyes. Lily was alive. She was less than 100 meters away. The relief was so intense, it almost made her dizzy. Now we need the evidence, reminded Patricia, keeping focus. How are we going to do this? The answer came with Marcus, who entered the cafe and sat discreetly with them. I have an idea, he said, showing a small surveillance camera the size of a button. I can install this in the hallway with a view of the apartment door. If we can get clear images of Eleanor entering and leaving with Lily, we'll have something concrete to show the police. And if it's not enough, asked Rachel, maternal desperation, speaking louder, what if they still don't believe us? Marcus hesitated before responding. I have a contact at the local newspaper. If the police don't act, we can leak the story. Public pressure might force a proper investigation. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the best they had. Marcus left to install the camera, while Rachel and Patricia continued their vigil at the cafe, now with renewed hope. The afternoon gave way to early evening, and Rachel's anxiety grew with each minute. She was about to suggest a more direct approach when her cell phone, which she had briefly turned on to check messages, rang. The number was unknown. With trembling hands, she answered, "Hello? Rachel?" Caleb's voice sounded from the other end, completely surprising her. "Thank God I got through to you." Rachel signaled to Patricia, who approached to listen. "How did you get my number?" she asked, cautious. Patricia called the hospital this morning from her cell phone. A colleague recognized the number and informed me. Caleb's voice was tense, urgent. "Rachel, I made a terrible mistake. I should have believed you from the beginning." "Why the change of opinion now?" asked Rachel, suspicious despite the pang of hope she felt. "Michael," replied Caleb simply. "He showed me a drawing he made yesterday, before everything happened. In the drawing, he had drawn Eleanor taking Lily to a special place. When I asked what place that was, he said it was a secret that Grandma asked him not to tell." Rachel exchanged a significant look with Patricia. "Caleb, we know where Lily is. Eleanor took her to an apartment in Brookline, which she secretly rented weeks ago." The silence on the other end of the line lasted a few seconds. "How did you discover this?" "Marcus Wells, he's helping us." "Marcus?" The surprise was evident in Caleb's voice. "He told me he was going to abandon the case after I doubted you." "Apparently he has a stronger sense of justice than yours," replied Rachel, unable to contain the bitterness. Caleb ignored the jab. "Where are you exactly? I'll meet you right now." Rachel hesitated, still not completely confident. Patricia took the phone. "Mr. Newman, this is Patricia, Rachel's friend. Before we tell you where we are, I need to know, is the police with you? Is this some kind of trap?" "No," replied Caleb firmly. "I'm coming alone, and I'm bringing information that can help. Documents of Eleanor's that I found in her office, things she tried to hide. I believe they prove her involvement in Lily's disappearance." Patricia looked at Rachel, who slowly nodded. She gave Caleb the address of the cafe, who promised to arrive in 20 minutes. When Marcus returned, Rachel informed him about Caleb's call. The investigator seemed skeptical. "Strange, this sudden change," he commented. "Yesterday he was convinced you had something to hide." "He mentioned a drawing by Michael," defended Rachel, "and he said he has documents that incriminate Eleanor." "Well, we'll see when he arrives," replied Marcus, still distrustful. "The camera is installed, by the way, transmitting directly to my laptop." Punctually, 20 minutes later, Caleb entered the cafe. He looked worn out, with deep dark circles and a tense face. Seeing Rachel, he hesitated, as if unsure of his reception. "Rachel," he finally said, approaching the table, "I'm sorry, so very sorry." She didn't respond, just observed him as he sat down, placing a folder on the table. "I found this in Eleanor's private office," he explained, opening the folder. "Their payment records, notes about your daily movements, even a detailed plan to frame you if Lily disappeared." Rachel and the others examined the documents. They were handwritten in Eleanor's elegant handwriting, notes about Rachel's schedules, observations about her routine with Lily, places she usually went. There were also bank withdrawal receipts and a phone number noted several times, with the name Alfred next to it. "The same man Marcus identified," murmured Rachel, feeling her shiver seeing the extent of Eleanor's plan. "There's more," continued Caleb, showing another document. "A rental contract, similar to the one Marcus found, but for another apartment in Cambridge. I believe it's a contingency location, in case the first one is discovered." Marcus took the document, examining it carefully. "The contract is recent, from just 3 days ago. She might be planning to change hiding places soon." "What do we do now?" asked Patricia. "Go to the police with all of this?" "Not yet," replied Marcus. "First, we need to visually confirm that Lily is in the Brookline apartment. Then, with all the evidence in hand, we'll seek out Detective Stevens from the Missing Persons Division. He's known for his integrity and has no connections to the Newman family." Caleb nodded, agreeing with the plan. He looked at Rachel, his eyes full of remorse. "I'll do whatever it takes to bring Lily back, Rachel, and to make up for my lack of trust in you." Rachel wanted to stay strong, distant, but the sincerity in Caleb's voice affected her. "I just want my daughter back," she said simply. At that moment, Marcus's laptop emitted a signal. Everyone leaned in to see the screen, which showed images from the camera installed in the hallway. The door of apartment 502 was opening. Eleanor came out, looking nervously to both sides before closing the door behind her. There was no sign of Lily. "She's leaving without the baby," observed Patricia. "That means Lily must be alone in the apartment now." Rachel felt panic grow. "My daughter is alone in there. What if something happens? What if she cries and no one is there to attend to her?" "Calm down," said Marcus, observing Eleanor enter the elevator. "This could be our chance. If she left without Lily, she probably doesn't intend to be gone for long. Maybe she went to get something or to meet someone. Or she's preparing to move to the other apartment," suggested Caleb somberly. The comment only increased Rachel's anxiety. "We can't wait any longer. If Lily is alone in there, this is the moment to act." "I agree," said Marcus, closing the laptop, "but we need to be careful. If we force entry, we could face charges of breaking and entering that would compromise our case." "I have an idea," intervened Caleb. "The building superintendent. I can say I'm a relative of Eleanor's, that she forgot something important and asked me to get it, with a little persuasion and perhaps some money." "It's risky," pondered Marcus, "but it might work, and it's more legal than breaking down the door." The plan was quickly established. Caleb and Marcus would go to the building to try to convince the superintendent, while Rachel and Patricia would wait outside, ready to enter as soon as they had access. Rachel watched the two men leave the cafe toward the building, her heart beating so hard it seemed about to burst from her chest. She was so close to Lily now, she could almost smell her daughter's scent, almost hear her soft cry. "It will work," assured Patricia, squeezing her hand. "In a few minutes you'll have Lily back." Rachel nodded, unable to speak due to the lump in her throat. The wait seemed endless, each second dragging like hours. Finally, Patricia's cell phone vibrated with a message from Marcus. "We got in. Apartment 502. Come now." The two women practically ran to the building. The superintendent, an elderly gentleman with a solicitous expression, let them in without questioning, evidently already convinced by Caleb's story and probably by his generous tip. In the elevator, Rachel could barely breathe from anxiety. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, she ran down the hallway until she found Marcus and Caleb waiting in front of the slightly open door of apartment 502. "She's here," whispered Caleb, his face illuminated by a smile of relief. "Lily is here, Rachel." Rachel gently pushed the door, entering the apartment with her heart in her throat. It was a small, functional place, basically furnished. In the living room there was a portable crib, and inside it— "Lily!" exclaimed Rachel, running to the crib. The baby, who was awake playing with a rattle, looked up at the sound of the familiar voice. Her little eyes widened in recognition, and she extended her little arms, babbling happily. Rachel picked her up, hugging her with all the strength she dared apply to such a small and fragile being. Tears flowed freely down her face as she kissed her daughter's head. her little face, her tiny hands. My love, she murmured between sobs. Mommy's here now. Everything's all right. Lily seemed well cared for, clean, fed, with no visible signs of neglect. This didn't surprise Rachel. Eleanor might be many things, but she didn't believe she would be capable of mistreating a baby. Her obsession was with Rachel, not with little Lily. We need to get out of here, warned Marcus, checking his watch. We don't know when Eleanor will be back. Rachel nodded, still cradling Lily against her chest. But before they could move, the sound of keys in the front door lock froze everyone in place. Eleanor was back. The sound of the key turning in the lock seemed amplified by the tense silence that took hold of the apartment. 5 pairs of eyes turned to the door that was slowly beginning to open. Rachel pressed Lily against her chest, as if fearing that her daughter might again be torn from her arms. Marcus reacted first, strategically positioning himself near the entrance. Caleb took a step forward, placing himself between Rachel and the door, while Patricia quickly grabbed her cell phone, ready to record whatever was about to happen. The door opened completely, and Eleanor entered, carrying shopping bags. Upon raising her eyes and finding herself facing the group gathered in her living room, she let the bags fall to the floor, cans and packages scattering across the wooden floor. Her face, normally composed and haughty, transformed into a mask of shock and indignation. "What is the meaning of this?" she hissed, her gaze alternating between the familiar faces until it rested on Rachel, who was holding Lily. "How dare you invade my property? Caleb, what do you think you're doing?" "It's over, Eleanor," replied Caleb, his voice firm but controlled. "We know everything. The men you hired to scare Rachel, the false documents, the plan to frame her. Everything." Eleanor laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "I don't know what you're talking about. This is my apartment, and that," she pointed to Lily, "is my granddaughter." "Lily is my daughter," declared Rachel, taking a step forward, her courage renewed by the little one's presence in her arms. "And you kidnapped her." "Kidnapping? How absurd!" Eleanor closed the door behind her, blocking the only exit. "I saved her from a neglectful mother who left her alone to answer a phone call, a mother who would probably sell her to the first buyer who appeared to pay her debts to loan sharks." "Debts that you invented," intervened Marcus, showing the documents they had found. "Just as you forged Rachel's signature on these loan contracts. An impressive forgery, I must say, but still detectable by an expert." Eleanor narrowed her eyes, assessing Marcus. "The famous investigator. I thought Caleb had dismissed your services." "And he did," confirmed Marcus. "But I discovered that I have a personal interest in unmasking elaborate schemes against innocent people." Eleanor's smile disappeared, replaced by a calculating expression. "You have no proof of anything. It's the word of a sanitation worker, against mine. Who do you think the authorities will believe?" "Perhaps the authorities will believe this," said Patricia, raising her cell phone, which had been recording the entire conversation since Eleanor entered. "Your implicit confession is recorded, and we have more. The documents in your handwriting, detailing the plan, the payment records to the men who scared Rachel, the rental contract for this apartment under your maiden name." For the first time, a flash of doubt passed over Eleanor's face. She looked at Caleb as if seeking some support, some understanding. "You don't understand, Caleb. I did this for Michael, for you, for Marianne." "No," replied Caleb, shaking his head. "You did this for yourself, Eleanor, for your sick obsession with control, with keeping everything exactly as it was when Marianne was alive." "Marianne was my daughter," shouted Eleanor, her composure finally breaking. "My only daughter, and that woman," she pointed to Rachel with contempt, "appears out of nowhere, identical to her, taking her place in the house, with my grandson. With you. I couldn't allow it. I couldn't let Marianne's memory be replaced." Rachel took a step forward, still cradling Lily, who was beginning to get agitated with the shouting. "I never wanted to replace Marianne, Mrs. Matthews. I never knew about the resemblance until I arrived at the mansion. It was a coincidence, nothing more." "Coincidence?" Eleanor laughed bitterly. "You really expect me to believe that? The same facial structure, the same eyes, the same smile. Even Michael noticed. He called you Aunt Marianne because he misses his mother, explained Caleb softly. And Rachel was kind to him, gave him attention and affection, something he hadn't received in a long time, not even from us. Eleanor took a step back, her face contorting in an expression of pain. I loved Marianne more than anything in this world. When she left us, I swore I would keep her memory alive, that I would protect her son, that no one would take her place. No one is taking her place, said Caleb, cautiously approaching his mother-in-law. Marianne will always be Michael's mother, will always have her place in our hearts. But we can't live trapped in the past, Eleanor. Michael needs a complete family, needs joy, life. And that's what Rachel brought back to our house, he continued, looking at the young woman with Lily in her arms. Not a replacement for Marianne, but something new, something different, something that all of us desperately needed. Caleb's words seemed to have some effect on Eleanor. Her shoulders dropped slightly, and for a moment the mask of coldness gave way to an expression of tiredness and defeat. What will happen now? She asked, her voice suddenly more fragile, older. Are you going to turn me over to the police? Marcus took a step forward. That depends on you, Mrs. Matthews. If you cooperate, confess what you did, peacefully return Lily, and agree to psychological treatment, perhaps we can reach an agreement that avoids the full criminal process. Eleanor looked at Lily, who was now observing her grandmother with childish curiosity. For a long moment no one spoke, the silence broken only by the baby's soft babbling. Finally, Eleanor sighed deeply. I fed her on schedule, changed her diapers, sang her to sleep. We know that, replied Rachel softly. She's well cared for. Thank you for that. Something in Rachel's genuine gratitude seemed to touch Eleanor in a way that no logical argument had managed. Her eyes filled with tears, and she allowed herself to sit on the sofa, suddenly seeming small and fragile. I just wanted to protect what was left of my family, she murmured. After I lost Marianne, Michael and Caleb were all I had left. You won't lose us, assured Caleb, sitting beside her. But you need to let the past rest, Eleanor. You need to let us move forward. While Caleb continued to speak softly with Eleanor, Marcus made a discreet signal to Rachel and Patricia, indicating that they should prepare to leave. Lily, sensing the tension diminish, had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, exhausted by the excitement of the reunion. We'll take Eleanor to the police station, said Marcus in a low voice. Detective Stevens is waiting. He understands the delicacy of the situation and has guaranteed a discreet process. Rachel nodded, relieved to see that the confrontation had ended without violence. As they prepared to leave, Caleb helped Eleanor to stand. The matriarch seemed to have aged 10 years in the last few hours, her body bent by the weight of her actions and the inevitability of the consequences. At the apartment door, Eleanor stopped and turned to Rachel. Oh, you really didn't know? About the resemblance to Marianne? Rachel shook her head. No, ma'am, it was just fate, perhaps. A sad smile touched Eleanor's lips. Fate. Marianne believed in that. She said nothing was coincidence, that everything happened for a reason. She paused, looking at Lily. Take good care of her. And of Michael, too. He likes you very much. I will, promised Rachel. Of both. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements, testimonies, and legal procedures. At the police station, under the supervision of Detective Stevens, a fair and compassionate man, Eleanor confessed everything, from hiring the men to scare Rachel to the elaborate plan to frame her for Lily's disappearance. As Marcus had promised, considering Eleanor's cooperation and her evident need for psychological treatment, an agreement was established. She would be referred to a specialized clinic instead of a common prison, where she would receive the necessary treatment for her obsession and unresolved traumas related to the loss of her daughter. When they finally left the police station, the Boston sky was beginning to brighten with the first rays of the sun. Rachel felt the weight of the last few days on her shoulders, an exhaustion that went beyond the physical, but also a lightness in her heart that she hadn't experienced since Lily's disappearance. Where are you going now? Asked Caleb as they walked to the car, where Patricia was waiting with the sleeping Lily. Rachel hesitated. She hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know. Maybe I'll stay with Patricia for a few days until I find a place." "Come back home," said Caleb simply. "To the mansion. Michael is waiting for you both. He asked about you and Lily all night." "Are you sure? After everything that happened?" Caleb took Rachel's hands in his. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I made a terrible mistake in doubting you, Rachel. I let the shock and Eleanor's manipulations cloud my judgment, but now I see clearly." He paused, looking deeply into her eyes. "When you and Lily arrived that rainy night, something changed in the mansion. Life returned, laughter returned, even the colors seemed more vibrant. Not because you look like Marianne, but because you are you, strong, kind, resilient." Rachel felt tears spring to her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, of hope. "I felt that too. From the first day I felt as if I were coming home." The smile that illuminated Caleb's face at that moment erased the last vestiges of doubt in Rachel's heart. Together they walked to the car, where Patricia was waiting with a knowing smile. The journey back to the Newman mansion was silent, each lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary events of the past few days. When they finally arrived, the imposing building seemed different to Rachel's eyes, no longer a symbol of inaccessible wealth or a setting of tensions and suspicions, but a home, a place where she and Lily could belong. Martha was waiting at the door, her face lighting up upon seeing Rachel with Lily in her arms. Behind her, still in pajamas and with messy hair, was Michael, his eyes wide with expectation. "Aunt Rachel!" he exclaimed, running to hug her as soon as she entered. "You're back, and you brought Lily." Rachel knelt to receive the enthusiastic hug from the boy, carefully balancing Lily in one arm, while the other embraced Michael. "Yes, dear, we're back." "To stay?" he asked, his childish eyes full of hope. Rachel looked at Caleb, who nodded with a warm smile. "Yes, Michael, to stay." The following weeks brought a new routine to the Newman mansion. Without Eleanor's intimidating presence, who continued her treatment at the clinic, the house seemed to breathe more freely. Rachel initially returned to occupy the staff room, but gradually, her things and Lily's began to migrate to more central areas of the house. Michael flourished in the constant presence of Rachel and Lily, developing a special bond with the baby, whom he affectionately called "my little sister." Caleb, in turn, returned to smiling frequently, arriving home earlier from work, actively participating in the family life that was forming. One afternoon, while Lily and Michael were taking a nap, supervised by Martha, Caleb found Rachel in the garden, admiring the roses that were beginning to bloom with the arrival of the Boston spring. "They're beautiful," he commented, approaching. "Yes," agreed Rachel, "they bring life to the garden." Caleb gently took her hand. "As you brought life to this house, to all of us." Rachel smiled, squeezing his hand in response. "Who would have thought that rainy night would change everything?" "Fate, perhaps," suggested Caleb, remembering Eleanor's words about Marianne's beliefs. "Perhaps," agreed Rachel, "or simply the need we all had for healing, for a fresh start." Caleb looked at her with intensity. "Rachel, there's something I've wanted to ask you for weeks, something that was interrupted that day." Rachel felt her heart accelerate, remembering the unfinished conversation in the kitchen, moments before Lily's disappearance. "What I feel for you," continued Caleb, "goes beyond gratitude or friendship. It's something I haven't felt in a long time, something I thought I would never feel again." "Caleb, Let me finish, please," he gently interrupted. "I know it's complicated. The resemblance to Marianne, everything that happened. But I want you to know that what I feel is for you, Rachel Oliver. For the strong woman who faced everything to protect her daughter. For the kind person who brought back my son's smile. For the generous soul who brought light back to this somber house." The words touched Rachel deeply. "I feel something for you too, Caleb. Something that grew day by day even when I tried to deny it." He came closer, gently touching her face. "I'm not asking for answers now. I just want us to know where we stand, that we can explore these feelings without rushing, at our own pace." Rachel nodded, feeling a quiet happiness spread through her chest. One day at a time? One day at a time, agreed Caleb. 6 months later, the Newman mansion was unrecognizable. The heavy curtains that once blocked the light had been replaced by light fabrics that let the sun enter freely. Photos of happy moments, Michael with Lily, Caleb and Rachel on a picnic, the four together in the park, filled the walls previously dominated by formal portraits. Rachel had transformed the old guest room into a colorful and welcoming space for Lily, now almost a year old and taking her first steps, always, closely followed by an attentive Michael, who took his role as older brother very seriously. Eleanor, after months of intensive therapy, was beginning to make supervised visits to the mansion. The healing process was slow and sometimes painful, but she demonstrated significant progress in accepting the new family reality. In a symbolic gesture of reconciliation, she had brought a small photo album of Marianne for Rachel, finally acknowledging that preserving her daughter's memory didn't mean preventing others from finding happiness. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, the family was gathered in the garden for a special lunch. Marcus Wells and Patricia, who had become close friends of the family after the dramatic events, were also present. While Martha served dessert and the children played on the grass, Caleb stood up discreetly and, to everyone's surprise, knelt before Rachel. "Rachel Oliver," he began, taking a small velvet box from his pocket, "you transformed my life in ways I never imagined possible. You brought love, joy, and hope back to this home, to me and to Michael." He opened the box, revealing a delicate diamond ring. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of building together the future of this family that is already ours?" Rachel, with tears of happiness in her eyes, looked around, at Michael, who was watching the scene with a radiant smile, at Lily, who was babbling happily in Patricia's arms, at Marcus, who nodded in approval, even at Eleanor, who offered a small smile of acceptance. "Yes," she answered, extending her hand to Caleb. "Yes, I accept." As Caleb slid the ring onto her finger and embraced her under the applause of those present, Rachel couldn't help but think of the extraordinary journey that had brought her there, from the storm that led her to the Newman mansion on that desperate night, to the emotional storms that nearly destroyed everything, to finally this moment of peace and happiness. Life had taught her that, just like the Boston seasons, which changed from rain to sun with unexpected rapidity, human destinies could also change in an instant, sometimes for the worse, but often, when least expected, for something much better than one dared to dream. Looking at her new family gathered in the garden, illuminated by the afternoon sun, Rachel knew with absolute certainty that she had finally found her true home. Not in the walls of the Newman mansion, but in the hearts of the people who now surrounded her with love,